Alright, my midterms are officially over, so I will be back to doing my daily updates and forecasts on the California wildfires. Sorry for starting this live stream a little bit late. I'm actually under a public safety power shutoff right now, so I had to go up to the North Bay to my parents' house and able to do this report. So that kind of ties into what's going on. There's extreme wildfire danger, so we do have a number of those power shutoffs currently happening, and there's a lot to talk about. I haven't done one of these updates in about a week, so I'll give all the numbers and updates on all our fires over what's happened over the last week, and then we're also really going to dive into the weather conditions right now. Right now, as many of you know, there is a red flag warning over the majority of the state. You can actually see where it is on this map. Almost all of California is covered in this red flag warning. If you don't know what that means, it basically means there's extreme wind gusts, very dry air, and that can allow for easy fire starts, and then when a fire does start, you can get a rapid rate of spread. So fire conditions about as bad as they get, about as bad as they can get right now. So we're going to dive into all those weather conditions and then also look at the Silverado Fire, which just started down here in Southern California. And I think I actually want to talk about this one first, because this is the most pressing issue that we have right now. You can actually see some of the smoke coming up from Southern California right now. Again, this is called the Silverado Fire, and it just started earlier this morning. So we can actually zoom in on this fire perimeter and hotspot map to take a look at where this fire is and what it looks like it's doing. Now, one thing I will point out, when it comes to this map, the red line here represents the fire perimeter, and then these little red dots represent the hotspots. So looking at this map right now, it doesn't look like there's that many active hotspots, although I will say that they make this map based on satellite data, so you can't completely trust what it's saying and where the active fires are, because one, it's coming from a satellite, and two, it's hard to know when this exactly was updated. But you can see that this is the Silverado Fire, and when it comes to the fire perimeter, you can see that it was moving extremely close and even into some of these more populated areas. So you can see, especially on the southern and southeastern or southwestern edge of this fire, it was actually moving into some of these communities, and this was causing a number of evacuations in the area. So we can actually look at the map for where these evacuations have taken place. As always, I'm not exactly sure the last time this map was updated, so be sure to just search this up yourself. You can just type in this URL here, or I'm sure if you just say Silverado evacuation map, it'll pop up on Google. But you can see there are evacuations in place, and I do know about 60,000 people are currently under this evacuation order due to the Silverado Fire. So we can actually take a look at two videos of what's going on in Southern California. There's a few things I notice in this video. One is obviously just the extremely poor air quality. That means there's a lot of smoke in the area, which makes me not exactly trust that hotspot map we were just looking at, because with all this smoke being produced, I'm expecting there's a lot of active fire going on with the Silverado Fire. So as always, if you live in this area, be sure to take the evacuation order seriously. And I personally kind of think you should even evacuate if you're even just in the relative area, even just ahead of time. It's always better to play it safe than sorry. Now, the other thing I noticed looking at this video is how extreme the winds are. And that's really the key thing that has caused this fire to start and spread so rapidly. It's because of the extreme winds. Now you can see these winds blowing those trees and how fast the smoke is moving due to those extreme winds. Now there's another video here we can take a quick look at. And when it comes to this fire, like I said, the winds have been the key thing that have allowed this fire to spread so rapidly. And we're going to take a look at the forecast because there's some bad news and good news. The bad news is these extreme winds are going to continue, but the good news is they're not going to continue for that much longer. So we can actually take a look at what caused this fire, how it started in the first place, and the weather conditions that worked together to really kick this fire off. So looking at about 1 a.m. this morning, you can see these extreme wind gusts that moved into Southern California. I was actually going to be going down to this area with the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory to actually get some data on these winds, and I hate to say it, but it was these winds that have caused the Silverado Fire and are continuing over the next 2 days. So you can see between 1 a.m. and 11 a.m., these Santa Ana winds actually started to increase. If we click on one of these values, you can see that is above hurricane force wind gust. That is 79 miles per hour. So the reason that's important is if there's any little ignition and you have these kind of winds, that can just rapidly spread the fire. One, because it can just push the flame forward. Two, it pushes in a bunch of oxygen, which the fire needs to grow and spread. And then three, which I think is actually the most important aspect that the winds bring, is they can pick up burning embers and throw them ahead of the fire or even a mile, 2 miles away from the fire, which is called spotting. And what that does is it takes those burning embers and starts new little fires. So then that makes it much harder to actually fight, because then you have to fight multiple fires all at the same time, and then they can all just kind of grow and then combine into one large fire. So that's about 11 a.m. You can see that's honestly the highest wind gust value I've seen on the Windy website since this fire season began. And that's saying a lot, because this has been the worst wildfire season in the history of California. Over 4 million acres burned as of right now. So if we look at what's going on about right now, you can see those extreme wind gusts are still in the area. You can see it still says in the 70s. Again, hurricane force winds are, I believe, 74 miles per hour and above. So when you have these 80 mile per hour winds, that is significant. And something to point out, they're coming from inland. It would actually be better if these winds were pushing in from the coast, because that would push in some cooler temperatures, some moisture. But when you get these winds flowing from inland, it actually pushes in dry air. And we can take a look at that on this map, because the humidity is about as bad as it can get. 5% is something that unfortunately we have been seeing all too much this fire season, but that's about as bad as humidity can get. And the reason that's important is because when the air is dry, then the vegetation gets dry, and that just allows a fire to start and spread much faster. This can make sense if you've ever gone to a campfire and tried to start a fire with a dry log or a moist log. It makes a lot of sense which is easier to start your fire, and then which one's going to be burning hotter and faster. So we can actually back this up to look at the kind of conditions we had when this fire started. So you can see at 1 a.m. there's 17% humidity. You never want to see humidity that low at a time when it should be around the 60s or 70s with the colder air. You can see throughout the nighttime hours, those humidity numbers stayed extremely low, even getting into the single digits in some places. So around when this fire started, it was about 6 to 7 a.m. when this fire first kicked off. You can see humidity was extremely low, and our wind gusts were up in the hurricane force range. So I actually want to go back to those wind gusts to see what they're going to be doing over the next few hours and then over the next few days, because this is going to be the key factor that influences this fire moving forward. So you can see right now, winds are about as bad as you're ever going to see them. If you live in Southern California, you're probably pretty familiar with Santa Ana's during wildfire season. Brings in this dry air from the inland valleys and leads to some rapid fire spread. Now if we move forward to 5 p.m., you can see the winds do show that they're going to be calming down, but 63 mile per hour wind gust is still about as extreme as you're ever going to see. We'll see if overnight, if they start to actually go away. Yeah, we're still in the 40 mile per hour range, which is definitely significant. That's still going to push the fire forward at a rapid pace and then also lead to some of that spotting that I was just talking about. So you can see wind gusts staying over 40 miles per hour really for the next 24 hours. So I hate to say it, but that's the last thing you want to see. Personally, I think wind gust, out of our three wildfire variables, temperature, winds, and humidity, I think winds play the biggest role when it comes to rapidly spreading a fire. So it's definitely not what we want to see, that the wind gusts are going to remain above 40 miles per hour over the next 24 hours. Now, after that 24-hour period, getting into 5 p.m. tomorrow, we finally start to see these Santa Anas calm down. So by about 5 to 8 p.m. tomorrow, our wind gusts are going to be back into the 20 mile per hour range, and then they're really going to start to calm down Tuesday night, working into Wednesday morning. So if I had to just summarize what I think is going to happen with this fire, I unfortunately would say that we're likely to see some extreme fire behavior over the next 24 hours. Although moving forward after that, things should be getting better. It's also interesting to just look at the temperatures that we're dealing with. Temperatures aren't all that warm. We're maybe in the 60s and 70s in some places. Looking at tomorrow, maybe mid to high 70s. Wednesday, 70s again. So that's not really playing a big role with the Silverado Fire. In the past in this area, we've had triple-digit temperatures, and right now it's looking pretty moderate. So temperature isn't the big thing that's leading to this fire starting and spreading. It really comes down to those wind gusts and the extremely dry air. Now, when it comes to the humidity, unfortunately, that dry air is going to be sticking around, especially for the next 24 hours. You can see we barely even get out of the teens for the next 24 hours. So I'm not only worried about the Silverado Fire, I'm actually worried about this entire area as those wind gusts remain and the air remains extremely dry. Let's see if the humidity does get a little bit better moving into Wednesday. We finally get into the 20s and 30s, but you can see that dry air does stick around over this region for quite some time. So I always like looking at these charts because it's a little easier just to see the numbers really quickly. Like I said, temperature's not all that extreme. We're in the low to mid 70s, but that red flag warning will be sticking around through Tuesday. So like I said, next 24 hours, bad fire danger for Southern California, although once we can get through Tuesday, things are going to be looking better. So the next thing I always like to see is the temperatures, winds, and humidity all on the same graph. And just to quickly explain why these are so important, temperature is an easy one. Warmer it is, the worse wildfire is going to be. Luckily, that doesn't look all that bad right now. Now, wind, like I said, can spread a fire faster and also lead to spot fires. And unfortunately, over the next 24 hours, it's going to be pretty bad. You can see this is showing wind gusts in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range. Although the National Weather Service charts typically show it much lower than it actually will be, I'm expecting we could still see some 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts in this area, especially throughout the day today. And then tomorrow, we're still going to be in that 40 to 50 mile per hour range. So wind gust wise, over the next 24 hours, not looking good, but that is exactly what you want to see. Getting into Wednesday, our winds are going to be below 10 miles per hour. So if this fire is still going on and if it has increased, starting Wednesday, they should be able to get some great control over this fire as temperatures drop into the 50s, winds drop to 5 miles per hour, and then our humidity rises up. So the reason humidity is important, like I said, dry air makes dry vegetation, which makes it easier for fire to spread. And you can see, just like with the winds, the main area of concern is over the next 24 hours. So we have those extreme wind gusts, and then we also have this humidity staying in the teens really for the next 24 hours, even getting into the single digits at some times. The good news though, just like the winds dropping getting into Wednesday, the humidity will be going up. So if we can just get through the next 24 to 48 hours, things will hopefully be looking up pretty soon here. So once again, we've been talking about the Silverado Fire. If you are just joining this live stream, the Silverado Fire started in Southern California this morning around 6 a.m. and about 60,000 people are currently under evacuation. That's showing the evacuation map right there. And unfortunately, extreme wind gusts will be remaining over this area along with extremely dry air. So this is certainly the key fire I'm going to be watching over the next 24 hours. And I'll actually also get back to this fire at the end of this video, just in case you've missed what I've said. I will get back to that fire and give a quick update towards the end of this live stream. But I do want to get into the next topic, which is the red flag warning in the North Bay and Northern California. And that's a pretty good way to say it, because the red flag warning basically does cover all of Northern California. It's extremely rare to see the entire North Bay covered in a red flag, but you can see there is not an area in the North Bay that does not have this red flag. And if I had to sum this up, as of right now, I would say we dodged a bullet. The conditions last night were about as bad as wildfire conditions possibly get. So the fact that we don't have some new massive fire in Northern California is honestly some of the best news I've heard all wildfire season. So we can actually take a look at the satellite imagery to prove that point. You can see there are no major fires in Northern California. Can't emphasize enough how happy I am to say that, because there were some extreme conditions last night. Now, before I actually show you those weather conditions, I'll just summarize what's going on with this red flag warning. Basically, that means dangerous wildfire conditions. The reason for that, with strong winds, low relative humidity, it makes it easier for new fires to start. And then when new fires start, it allows them to spread faster. And then you can also see it can lead to some power outages too, as I experienced this morning, which is why I am actually now up in the North Bay so that I could do this video. So, like I said, extreme wildfire conditions, some gusts up to 70 miles per hour. I'll show you a few gusts in a minute that are unlike anything I've seen in California before. So you can see minimum daytime humidity in the single digits with those kind of gusts, especially last night into this morning. This was about as bad as it gets, and I'm happy to say no new fires started. So let's talk about our top 3 wildfire variables: temperature, winds, humidity. That's the 3 I go to in every single video, because that's the 3 things that really describe your wildfire danger. And when it comes to temperature, things are looking pretty good. Just like in SoCal with the Silverado Fire, temperatures aren't all that high. And especially when compared with some of those conditions we have had over the last few weeks, where we had 106 degrees, 108 degrees, you can see right now we're in the low to mid 70s. So when it comes to temperature, this isn't actually a big factor in our wildfire danger right now. One of the factors that is leading to some of our fire danger right now is the humidity. And this was especially true last night. As you can see, at 2 a.m. this morning, humidity was in the single digits as it just pushed in over the entire state. And you can see as we move through to 11 a.m. this morning, that dry air just completely covers California, and we get into the low single digits in some places. I believe the lowest I saw was 3% relative humidity, which is just ridiculous. So you can see that 11 a.m. we're into the single digits over basically all of Northern California. There's that 3% that I was just talking about. That's about right now. So although I said the conditions last night and this morning were about as bad as they can get, you can see we do still have some extreme conditions right now. And unfortunately, they're going to be sticking around for the next 24 hours at least. If we actually go to that red flag warning, you can see it says through 5 p.m. Tuesday. So until 5 p.m. Tuesday, I'm going to be watching all the models, all the maps, all the weather conditions to really keep my eye on this and really keep my eye out for new fires starting, because these are the conditions that could lead to some new fire starts. We can also take a look at this graphic. It shows extreme fire weather concerns. You can see where those extreme concerns are, really in the exact spots you don't want to see it, like Napa and Sonoma County, moving all the way up into Redding, where we've had a lot of our fires already this year. So unfortunately, these conditions are right in some of the places where we've already had fires. So a new fire, I hate to jinx it, I'll knock on wood right here. New fire is the last thing we need, because a lot of these areas have just had enough this season already. So just to sum up again, wind gusts 70 miles per hour and higher, and that red flag warning lasts until 5 p.m. Tuesday. Okay, so getting back into the humidity map, let's try to take a look at how long this dry air is going to be sticking around. You can see over the next 3 hours, it's going to remain bad 4% at 5 p.m. Moving into 8 p.m., it's going to be at 7%, still in the single digits, which is the last thing you want to see when it comes to relative humidity. Now, here's a pretty key feature, is the overnight humidities, because this is actually when we've seen a lot of our worst fires happen both this season and in previous seasons. In the overnight hours, sometimes we'll get what's called a downslope windstorm. Those can also happen during the day, but some of the worst ones recently have happened to occur overnight. And then when you mix that with extremely dry air, that allows fires to happen during the nighttime hours, when typically it's safer fire conditions, when it's supposed to be cool and moist. You can see that dry air will be sticking around all night long, not even getting out of the teens throughout the North Bay and majority of California for that matter, staying in the teens into Tuesday morning, and then getting back into possibly the single digits throughout Tuesday afternoon. Now, the good news is that red flag warning does stop at this time, Tuesday 5 p.m. And then after that, you can see the humidity finally starts to come up. That's actually part of the reason that the red flag warning is ending, is this is when the humidity starts to rise up. Now, really, I've said this before in the video, the main thing I'm always concerned about when it comes to wildfire, while temperature and humidity certainly plays a role, the main thing I always worry about is extreme wind gusts. And you can see that last night into this morning, wind gusts were about as bad as you'll ever see them over numerous parts of Northern California. So if we zoom in here, you can see this is at 1 a.m. last night or early this morning, however you want to say it. And you can see some of these wind gusts like around the North Complex area, 50 miles per hour. Some of these spots down in Napa and Sonoma, it says 40 miles per hour, but I've actually been looking at some of the observations that some of our weather stations have picked up, and there were some into the 80s and even high 80s in some places. And I could actually show you that right here. Jan Knoll, great meteorologist, he posted this. It said that St. Helena gusted to 89 miles per hour last night. That is just absolutely ridiculous, because we have had some extreme gusts throughout this entire year that's led to some of the massive fires we've already had in these areas. And you can see last night, the wind gusts were even stronger than what we had during some of those fires. 89 mile per hour wind gusts. I don't really remember the last time I saw that in California. And the crazy thing is, that was typical in a lot of these places. There was areas of Mount Diablo, some spots in the Sierras that also got into that 70, 80 mile per hour range. So if I had to just sum it up, we really dodged a bullet last night, but unfortunately, the danger is still not over. So throughout last night, we had those extreme wind gusts. Happy to say, no new fires started. Now it's interesting to look at what's going to be happening over the next few hours and then into the next day. You can see, as of right now, those extreme wind gusts are sticking around. In Napa and Sonoma area, we're still in the 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gust range. And then working into the North Complex area and the Sierras, we still have some wind gusts, again, in that 40 to 50 mile per hour range. And that's extreme enough right there. But then when you also factor in some canyons and drainages, that's when you can get those 89-mile-per-hour gusts that we saw last night. So let's look at what's expected over the next 5 hours. I'm happy to say this map at least is showing that these wind gusts should be calming down in the next 3 hours. You can see what was maybe 50 and 60 miles per hour should be going down to 35, which, I mean, that's still extreme, but at least it's not hurricane force anymore. Now, as we get into 8 p.m., I'm happy to say that trend continues as our wind gusts in the Napa-Sonoma area finally get back down into the 20s. You can see we do still have some extreme gusts on the eastern portions of the state. Now, I'm curious to look at what's expected tonight because last night was about as bad as it gets, and I'm hoping that's not what's showing up for tonight as well. You can see some of those extreme gusts do pop back up in the Chico area, right where the North Complex is, although as of 11 p.m., Napa and Sonoma should still be in the 20s. Now, this shows some good news and bad news as we get into 2 a.m. The area above Napa and Sonoma is saying that it should be lighter than earlier in the evening and a lot lighter than it was last night, although we do still have those extreme gusts up here in farther northern California. So as we move into 5 a.m., you can see winds do pick up a little bit in Napa and Sonoma, getting up to maybe in the 30 mile per hour range. But again, not the 70 miles per hour we saw last night. Where we do have some of those extreme wind gusts still are around the Quincy area. Exactly where we don't want to see it. This is where the North Complex happened. Paradise has had enough of these wildfires. So you can see there are some extreme wind gusts. And I mean, if I had to spin it in a good way, try to be positive, it's looking like less than last night. And no new fires started last night. So hopefully that's exactly what's going to happen tonight and we don't get any new fires starting. But you can see those extreme wind gusts do stick around throughout Tuesday night, especially in this northern area. But again, Napa and Sonoma looking better than last night. So getting into Tuesday at 5 p.m., that's when this red flag is ending. You can see those winds, especially in the North Bay, significantly calm down. We're now into the teens again, which is exactly what you want to see. And one other thing to note when I show wind gusts, that's looking at the gusts. So when you talk about sustained winds, that's what's going on. I accidentally clicked farther up into the atmosphere. I got worried for a second there because it was saying extreme wind gusts or winds, but you can see that the winds around Tuesday at 5 p.m. when that red flag warning is ending should be extremely calm over majority of Northern California. So that's exactly what you want to see. So getting back into here, if you missed this, if you're just joining the live stream, St. Helena last night had a yearly high of 89 mile per hour wind gusts. Humidity was in the single digits. Those wind gusts were all over Northern California, and I'm happy to say no new massive fires started. Can't emphasize enough how happy I am to say that. As of right now, we're in the clear, and I'm certainly knocking on wood, as those extreme conditions do hang around for a little while here. But as of right now, like I said, we're still looking good. Now, there is an area that I haven't mentioned yet that you've probably been waiting for me to talk about, because you can see a large amount of smoke coming off the creek fire here. So if we zoom into that, you can actually see where that's going on. That's a significant amount of smoke right there, and some of that might also be from the Castle Fire as well. We'll be able to actually see, the hotspots just popped up on the Silverado Fire. This was not showing at the beginning of this live stream, and you can see that this map is now showing that these hotspots do remain around the perimeter of the fire. Now, like I said, this is based on satellite data, so it might be actually worse than this map is showing. Right now, you'd look at a couple tiny little hotspots and think the fire's not all that bad. Again, don't take my word for it and don't completely trust this map because, again, it's based on satellite data. There's an evacuation warning in effect for 60,000 people. If you live remotely in this area, be sure to check all of your local resources to figure out what's going on with that fire. So getting back to it, I'm actually glad that our fire perimeter and hotspot map was still on this so that we could update you on the hotspots that have now shown up on that map. But we were talking about the Castle Fire and the Creek Fire, so we'll move up there. One thing I will show, we'll zoom out here real quick. You can see that this red flag is covering basically all of Northern California and really the majority of Southern California as well. So finally getting into the Castle Fire here. That's producing some of the smoke that we see in this area, although the majority of it is in fact coming from the Creek Fire. So if we zoom into the Castle Fire, you can see there are some remaining hotspots, but again, not as bad as it has been in the past. Certainly not as bad as it was 3 weeks ago. And that's encouraging to see because wildfire conditions are pretty extreme right now. It's also interesting to see that these two fires haven't officially connected yet. I'll be keeping my eye on that to see if that happens over the next few days. Overall though, when it comes to the Castle Fire, I'd say this one's looking pretty good. There's a lot of steep, rugged terrain, critically dry fuels in this area, so it's actually encouraging to see that with the extreme winds and dry air, that this appears as weak as it does. We're not seeing crazy hotspots or a lot of active fire, so that's great to see. Now, where we do have some active fire and a lot of that smoke being produced is with the Creek Fire up here. Again, I'll show it on the map here. You can see a lot of smoke coming off of this thing, and it's due to these hot spots that you see, especially in the northeastern section. So, while the Castle Fire didn't look that bad, the Creek Fire is looking fairly active right now. You can see a lot of these hot spots also on the interior of the fire, and there's some good news and bad news. I'll just start with the good news. On this northwestern section, you can see that it's starting to burn into some rockier terrain, as you can see with the gray color versus this green color here. So that's going to slow growth in this area. We'll also most likely see that on this active side of the fire, where we do have that gray color, which indicates less vegetation because there's more rocks. So as the fire gets in there, there's going to be less fuel for the fire, and some of this behavior should calm down. One other interesting thing, and you might be wondering why that isn't burning, as you do see that's an area that really could be burning, but it looks like it's almost just made a little horseshoe around this. And that's because this is an area that previously burned in 2018 with the Lions Fire. So with a previous fire that had burned out some of the vegetation, so by the time the Creek Fire got to this area, there's less fuel to keep the fire going, kind of a similar phenomenon to once it gets into rockier terrain. So that's some of the good news. As we get into rockier terrain and this fire scar, we should see some calming behavior, but the bad news is there is still very steep terrain, there is still a lot of critically dry fuels in this area, and that's leading to some active fire behavior, as you can see with all of these hotspots. That's actually looking a lot worse than the last update I did about a week ago. I've said this earlier in the video, but again, I took a week off from these videos because I was doing my midterms for my graduate program. I'm earning my master's in meteorology, but I'm happy to say midterms are done, so I will be back to doing daily forecasts and updates on the California wildfires. So, like I said, this is looking worse than the last update I gave, and really the worst news, I would say the biggest bad news, is that some of these areas on the southern edge actually appear to have flared up again. The last update I gave, we had no hotspots down here. This entire southern edge of the fire, and the western edge for that matter, looked extremely calm. We just had a couple select areas burning on this northeastern edge, but you can see, based on these hotspots, some of these previously out areas have flared back up again. Now, you might be wondering how that happens. Now, you might have a smoldering log, or sometimes a fire can continue actually burning underground in some of the roots and duff. And what happens is, when you get some of the extreme winds, like we're seeing right now with the red flag warning, that can actually take some of those smoldering areas and flare them back up, turning into full-on fires again, where we see these hot spots. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on the southern edge, as this was an area that previously we talked about being completely out. So that's certainly not what we want to see when it comes to the creek fire. Now I will just give the numbers on the Castle Fire. We are at 169,000 acres. That's up a bit from my last update, but not all that much, and containment is at 75%. Now, I think these next maps I'll show you will be the best ones to really update you on what's happened over the last week, while again, I was doing my midterms. So, looking at what burned over the last week, you can see, well, you probably can't see these letters and numbers here, but it's basically saying that the blue color is what burned over a month ago, and then the red color is what has recently burned. So you can see that, like I said, the southern area was a very active area in the past, like a month ago, but we haven't had all that much recent burning there. I'll be interested to see if we do get some red spots here, as there are some areas that appear to have flared up again. Now this really shows what has burned since my last update. You can see it's on this northeastern edge where we get these red colors, which again indicate what burned in the last day and in the last week. So it's majority on this northeastern edge. But like I said, the Lion's Fire scar is right there, so that'll start to slow some growth, and there's some rockier terrain right here, so that will hopefully slow some growth as well. So it's also interesting to look at the containment with this one. I would say the most interesting thing is the containment on this northern edge right here. That's right where we have the Lion's Fire, so it actually kind of makes sense. Where we are still uncontained though is indicated by this red line, where you can see that whole northeastern section, especially this finger sticking out here, where we do still see a lot of our active growth. One thing I will be curious to see is if some of these black lines over the next couple days actually turn back into uncontained areas, as we do see some spots that are flaring back up again and could act to threaten some of our previous containment lines. So in the past, the entire southern and western section were contained, although I will certainly keep you guys updated, as that could be subject to change. Now, like I said, good news, Lion's Fire scar, rockier terrain. Some of the bad news has to do with, one, that red flag warning, which is covering the creek fire, really leading to a lot of the active growth we have right now. That basically means extreme wind speeds, low relative humidity, both combining to create the active fire we see. But there's actually also some other factors leading to the growth and continued spread of this fire. One is terrain. With steeper topography, you get more wildfire behavior, and you can kind of see on this map that there is a lot of steep terrain in this area. There's Auberry to put this map into context. But really the key thing that's allowing this fire to actively burn, as we're seeing right now, but then also continuously burn over the last month, is the tree mortality in this area. So a few years ago, maybe starting about a decade ago, bark beetles in California and actually the entire western United States got extremely bad and killed just millions of pine trees across the western US. And you can see that this is one of those areas that was extremely affected by those bark beetles, which get in, they kill the pine trees, and then there's just thousands, if not millions of pine trees just sitting there waiting for a wildfire to burn. So that's kind of what's allowed the creek fire to continue for over a month now. There's just a ridiculous amount of dead fuel in this area due to those bark beetles. Now, this is always something I like to look at. This is the WRF S-Fire computer model. It is one of the best wildfire models in really the world. It was developed by one of my professors at San Jose State, Adam Kochansky, and it pairs the fire below with the winds above to really give you a good idea on what's going to happen with the fire over the next couple of days. And I would say for the most part, there's actually some good news with this fire. While we do have that red flag warning, the winds right over the fire actually don't look all that extreme. I am a little worried about this central part here that appears to have flared up in the last 24 hours, so some of these extreme winds could lead to some of those flared up regions expanding further. Now the good news though, where we have the most active fire growth is where we have not as extreme winds, although I'm hesitant to say that because one, this is just a model, and two, we're likely to still see some big gusts coming into the area. So what I always like to do with this model is just back it up to the beginning, take a look at the fire perimeter. This is showing what has burned with this fire, and then we can actually forward it 2 days, keep an eye on the fire perimeter. So we see a lot of growth in this northeastern section. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of growth, just continued growth in this northeastern section due to a few things. One, that red flag warning. Two, the steep terrain. And then three, all the dead pine trees that I was talking about due to those bark beetles. So it'll be interesting to look at the numbers for this fire. Again, I haven't updated on this one in over a week. So you can see we're now up to about 370,000 acres with this one, and containment is at 63%. Like I said, I'm going to be extremely curious to see what happens with this containment number over the next 24 hours, as we do have some flaring up regions. Now, as always, when it comes to evacuations, be sure to check the INCI website that has all the latest information. But I also like looking at the personnel, and you can see we do still have 780 personnel on this fire. This fire has honestly just been ridiculous, burning over a month. You can remember, this started over a month ago, and it had that crazy story with Joe Rosamond, who flew in with a Chinook helicopter and rescued over 100 people in one trip. I'm happy to say that I actually got to interview him. You can check out that video on my channel. But that was over a month ago, and you can see that this fire is still actively burning. So hopefully this one can start to calm down sometime soon as it gets into that rockier terrain. But another thing that's going to have a big impact on if it calms down is if the weather conditions calm down. And you can see that they are expected to calm down around Tuesday at 5 p.m. when that red flag warning officially ends. So when it comes to temperature, you can see we're in the 60s. That's much colder than we've had in the past for this area, where at the start of this fire, we were in the triple digits, and really it remained extremely warm for a number of weeks when this fire was first starting. So temperature-wise, we're looking good. Now, I wouldn't exactly trust this map too much. This is showing a lower elevation spot, but at the higher elevations, we are going to be seeing some extreme wind gusts, which will continue to spread this fire and flare up some of those hot spots that previously looked out. Now, the other thing to worry about is this relative humidity basically looks horizontal. Now, the reason that's bad is because typically at nighttime, you can see a rise in relative humidity where it gets up to 60, 80%, and that allows firefighters to come in, get a handle on the blaze, really get some good containment lines in. But you can see that humidity stays completely dry over the overnight hours. So that doesn't give firefighters a real break to get a good handle on the blaze. So if I had to sum up the creek fire, looking a lot more active than the last update I gave. One of the key things I'm concerned about right now, though, is some of these areas that previously looked out flaring back up again. So I will be keeping a close watch on those over the next couple of days. So, big thing that if you're just tuning into the live stream, no new fires in Northern California. Extremely happy to see that. And I'm not really seeing too many flare-ups with some of our old fires like we have just been talking about with the creek fire. We'll take a closer look at that though, because there is one fire from the past that could be flaring up a little bit. We'll get to that in a second though. I'll get back to the fire perimeter and hotspot map here. One, you can see where this red flag warning is taking place. It's in effect till Tuesday at 5 p.m. But first, I want to talk about the August complex up here, because I was certainly afraid that with this red flag warning, with the 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts, with the relative humidity in the single digits, I was afraid the August complex was going to flare back up again. Again, this is the largest wildfire in the history of California, over 1 million acres burned. To put it into context, if you were to straighten out this perimeter, it would stretch past Los Angeles. So I was really hoping and crossing my fingers that this one would not flare up again with the red flag warning, and I'm happy to say that it doesn't appear that it has. You guys might have better eyesight than me, but I don't see any hotspots on this, which is great news. So when it comes to the August complex, we are now well over 1 million acres. That's certainly not what you want to see, but we are at 93% containment, which is exactly what you want to see. So to put that number into context, because it's just so ridiculous to see a fire over 1 million acres. Typically, in a wildfire season in California, which is one of the worst wildfire places in the world, in a typical wildfire season, we get less than 1 million acres. So in one fire, we got more than we see in a typical wildfire season. Just ridiculous. So it's great to see that one has not flared back up again. Now, another fire that I was a little worried about, but doesn't appear to have flared back up again, is the Zogg fire here. Now, reporting on that, they have it as finalized, which is great to see. 100% containment, staying at 56,000 acres. Now, one thing I will point out, though, there's a couple hotspots popping up here. This is an area, again, covered by that red flag warning. And there's some extreme winds, so I will be keeping my eye on these hotspots, although I haven't been able to find any recent resources explaining what's going on with these fires. I'll be sure to let you guys know what's going on with those, and especially in my update and forecast tomorrow morning. I'll be definitely keeping my eye on those. Now, the next one that I was very worried about, even more so than the August complex, was the North complex, because this is an area, let's go back to our wind gust map. This is an area that had very extreme gusts last night. You can see it in this area. This map is showing 57 miles per hour, so in some of the drainages and canyons, it was more like 70 to 80. So this was the fire I was actually the most worried about flaring back up again. And you can see we're actually seeing some of that behavior taking place. A couple of hotspots on the interior of this fire. If I had to spin this in a positive way, I always like looking at the silver lining. It's better to see hotspots on the interior of a fire than on one of the edges here. Because in the interior, there will be less fuel for one of these hotspots to take off, because a lot of the fuel has already burnt out. If it was down here on the area where there's unburnt fuel and getting closer to spots like Paradise, I would be even more worried about these flaring back up, because with the extreme wind gusts still in the area, you could see some of these start to rapidly spread. So, unfortunately, we do see some flare-ups in the North complex. The good news is it's on the interior of the fire, and it doesn't look like there's all that many or it's gotten too extreme yet. I will keep my eye on this, though, and I will be sure to keep you guys updated as these hotspots progress. So just looking at the North complex, haven't updated on this in over a week now, but it is at 319,000 acres, not up all that much from my last update, which is great to say, and containment is at 96%. So that's another reason I'm not too worried about these hotspots. This entire area, except for maybe one select spot in the northwestern corner, this entire area has containment lines around it. So even if one of these hotspots did get big, this fire is already at 96% containment, so it doesn't pose too much danger to cities like Quincy or Paradise or Oroville. Now, with that being said, don't take my word for it. Be sure to keep up with all the recent information. Never take my word for it when I say a fire's looking good, because, again, I'm just going off of models and maps, which give you a good general idea, but it's nothing like on-the-ground information. It's why I actually love when you guys comment about what you're actually seeing in your areas, because it gives me a lot better idea of what's going on than models and maps like this. Now, the other fire that I was worried about flaring back up again was the glass fire. Santa Rosa and Napa and Sonoma had some of those extreme gusts. I showed this earlier. St. Helena, 89-mile-per-hour gust. If you're just joining the live stream, that is just ridiculous. Strongest gust we've seen all year, and one of the strongest gusts I've ever seen in California. So you got a little sneak peek there. So there it is. Sorry, I have about 40 tabs open. Sometimes I can get lost. So when it comes to the glass fire, I was certainly worried about this one flaring back up. And I read one report this morning that some areas did flare back up. We can see one little hot spot here. Although I would say, considering we had 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts, hurricane force, some strong wind gusts over this whole area. The hurricane force weren't over this whole area, but there were extreme gusts over this whole area. Got to clarify that there. I would say, overall, this is looking a lot better than it could be. Although there's one hotspot, and a source did say that glass fire has flared up, I would say it could be a lot worse. And really for Napa and Sonoma in general, looking at the satellite imagery, not having any new big fire to report on is the best news I've heard all season. So I will keep my eye on that hotspot though. I don't expect it to do anything crazy, but again, I will keep my eye on it. So when it comes to the glass fire, it's at 67,000 acres, and it does say finalized and 100% containment, although with that hotspot, I'll be curious to see if either of those change. Now, containment, though, is mostly due to getting great lines around an entire fire in the really dangerous areas, so our containment number might actually stay at 100% even though there is a flaring up region. So I'll keep my eye on that, but again, can't say this enough. With that red flag warning, with the extreme conditions last night, couldn't be happier to say there is no new fire, or no new major fire in Northern California. But with that being said, we're not out of it yet. Like I said, it's staying until Tuesday at 5 p.m., so make sure to keep an eye on all your local resources. I'll be doing another one of these videos tomorrow morning, really updating you guys on what's going on. Now, if you're just tuning into the live stream, I do want to go back and talk about one of the major fires that has started with this red flag warning and the extreme wildfire conditions that moved in last night and have really led to some extreme fire danger. And you can see the effects of what those extreme winds and dry air can do as we have seen a fire pop up in Southern California. This is the Silverado Fire down here, and right now it is causing the evacuation order of over 60,000 people. You can see the perimeter of this fire and some of the hotspots that are now showing up on this map. And if we zoom in here, you can actually see that the fire perimeter unfortunately looks like it's getting down into some of these populated areas. So this is the number one thing I'm going to be watching over the next 24 hours. While the North Bay and Northern California, I'll certainly keep my eye on to see if any new fires start. In Southern California, a new fire has started. So this, I would say, is the number one area of concern. I will definitely be reporting on this throughout this entire week. So just to show that evacuation map again, like I said, 60,000 people currently under an evacuation order. And unfortunately, that red flag is sticking around through Tuesday. So this danger and this fire spread are likely to continue over the next 24 hours. I hate to say it, but some extreme wind gusts and extremely dry air are over this fire for the next 24 hours. So this is definitely something I'm keeping my eye on. I know in my videos I always try to do a silver lining and stay positive, but this could be something that could get pretty bad. I always hate saying that kind of thing because I don't like how a lot of the media do a lot of fear type statements, but I'm just being honest. The conditions in this area are bad, and that fire is relatively close to some of our higher populated areas. That's, I guess, the best I could say right there. I will keep reporting on that one as that fire progresses. So, I want to end just by talking about the California wildfire season in general. 2020 has been the worst wildfire season in the history of California. Over 4 million acres burned. You can see the August complex. While I'm happy to say it hasn't flared up recently with that red flag warning, it has burned over 1 million acres, which is more than we typically see in an entire wildfire season. Also in the season, we had the SCU lightning complex, the Creek Fire, which has now moved up to the number 4 largest wildfire in the history of California list. That has changed since the last update I gave. It has now passed the LNU lightning complex, which also happened this year. Now, the North complex, also another fire this year, and there are a couple hot spots with that one, so I will be keeping my eye on that to see if that number goes up at all. But again, to put it into context, out of the top 6 largest wildfires in the history of California, 5 of them have happened this year. And you can see there's actually another one on this list. The Castle Fire has worked its way into the top 20 list. And unfortunately, as you can see in Southern California right now, we are not out of wildfire season yet. So I will continue to do these updates every single day. Midterms are over. My week break is over as well, with those midterms coming to an end, so I will be back to daily reports on the California wildfires. As always, thank you to CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service, all of our firefighters, not our wildfires, all of our firefighters for all the amazing work you do. Thank you to San Jose State, Dr. Craig Clements, Dr. Patrick Brown, Dr. Adam Kachansky for teaching me everything I know about wildfire. And if you or any of your friends or family have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you. The last thing I want to say, again, developing situation with the Silverado Fire in Southern California. Don't take my word for it. Make sure to stay updated with all the local resources and evacuation orders. Thanks for watching.